My perfect plan, designed for 42 United States Marines, would have gotten them all killed. 15 Gurkhas I dismissed as farmers saved us by disobeying my direct order. I was 31 years old then, a captain, and I was completely, utterly wrong about everything. We had the technology, the air support, the overwhelming force. They had faded uniforms and knives. For 2 hours after they ignored my command and vanished, I was certain they were all dead. My career was over. Then the radio crackled. Valley clear, 0 casualties. 47 enemy dead. For 13 years, the official report has been a lie. If you believe lessons paid for in blood shouldn't be buried by pride, stick around. Subscribe. Because the men who taught me this are disappearing, and it's time to tell the truth. For 13 years, this day has been a film in my head, playing on a loop. I never told anyone, not really. How do you explain it? How do you go home to your family, to your father who was a colonel, and tell them that your greatest lesson in warfare came from 2 hours of the most profound humiliation you've ever experienced? You don't. You just carry it. But a few weeks ago, I saw an obituary online. An old soldier from the Royal Gurkha Rifles passed away in his sleep. And it hit me. A gut punch. These men, these quiet, incredible men who showed me the truth, they're getting old. They're fading away. And if they go, the story goes with them. The real story. Not the after-action report I filed. So, here I am. It's time to talk. Because I was there. I was the officer in charge. And I was the one who was completely and utterly wrong about everything. So you have to ask yourself these questions. I know I do. Every single day for 13 years. What does it feel like, as a commander, to watch men under your charge just walk away from a direct order and into what you are certain is their death? Pure suicide. How do you face your other men, the ones who saw it all, the next morning? How do you put on that face of authority when your authority has been proven to be a complete joke, a dangerous fantasy? And what's the real difference, when it all comes down to it, between a soldier who follows orders to the letter and a warrior who just wins? That's what this is about. You need to hear this. You need to understand what happened. Because they didn't just clear a valley that day. They blew up my entire world. And they did it without saying a damn word. It was the summer of 2011, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. And if you were there, you know that was like saying the very center of hell, Sangin district specifically. At the time, it was the most violent piece of real estate on the planet for an American Marine. Our whole strategy was this thing we called clear, hold, build. A slow, grinding, methodical process. You take a piece of ground with overwhelming force, you hold it with heavily armored patrols, and you hope something good grows in the space you made. The heat was a living thing. Over 40 degrees Celsius every day, sucking the life out of you before the enemy even got a chance. And the dust. God, the dust. This fine gray powder like talcum. It got into your weapons, your food, your lungs. It was the taste of the war. My war, at least. And the mission that day was just routine. Another clearing operation. Just another Tuesday in hell. I walked into the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center, and the first thing that hit me wasn't the heat, but the cold. The air conditioning was humming, fighting a losing battle, but it was there. And the smell. It's a smell I'll never forget. Burnt coffee, stale for hours. And that weird, sharp, electric smell of ozone coming off all the servers and the radios and the half a dozen plasma screens showing drone feeds and digital maps. It's the smell of modern war. The smell of trying to make chaos fit neatly onto a PowerPoint slide. My plan was up there on the main screen. A beautiful thing of converging arrows and phase lines and color-coded objectives. I was proud of it. It was a perfect plan. It felt safe in there. It felt like I was in control of everything. Like the whole damn war was just a game on a screen that I was about to win. Of course, I'd heard the stories. You couldn't be in Helmand for more than a week without hearing them. From some British officer over a warm beer or in whispers at a shared briefing. The Gurkhas, little guys who were ghosts in the hills. Stories about their knives, the kukris. Stories that sounded like they belonged in a history book, not in a war being fought with satellites and Reaper drones. I remember my gunny, Torres. He heard one about them taking a position with only knives, and he just laughed, shook his head and said, "Sounds like some kind of fairy tale, sir." And I agreed. I was a Marine. We were the best. We had the technology, the armor, the air support. They had stories. I saw them as a quaint anachronism, a little piece of the old British Empire, useful for holding a flank and not much else. I was an idiot, a confident, educated, well-trained idiot. The first time I saw them up close, really saw them, was about 20 minutes before the op was supposed to kick off. I stepped out of my MRAP, out of the refrigerated air, and the heat just hit me like a physical blow. They were standing apart from my guys, a small cluster of 15 men who seemed smaller than I expected. My Marines were big lads, bristling with all the latest gear, digital camo, high-tech everything. The Gurkhas, they looked like they'd been dug out of the earth. Their uniforms were faded, a different pattern, worn at the cuffs and knees. And the smell. It wasn't the smell of unwashed bodies, it was different. An earthy smell, like damp soil after a rain, mixed with a faint, sweet scent of what I now know was a type of local tobacco they chewed. It wasn't unpleasant, it was just alien. I remember turning to my gunny, Torres, and just shaking my head. I thought, these guys look like farmers, hard farmers maybe, but just farmers. I decided I should go over, play the part of the magnanimous commander. I walked over to their leader, this Havildar Gurung, a man who wasn't much taller than my rifle. I put on my best officer voice, the one that's supposed to be both friendly and authoritative. And I said to him, pointing back at my vehicles, "Havildar, we've got plenty of spare water and MREs if your men are running short. Make sure they top up before we head out." And he just looked at me. Didn't smile, not really. Just this calm, level gaze that seemed to take in everything. My clean uniform, my expensive sunglasses, everything. And after a second, he just gave this tiny nod and said, "We are sufficient, Captain. Thank you." That was it, not rude, but it was like a door shutting in my face. It was the first time I felt it, that feeling of being assessed, weighed, and found wanting. Then I saw it, the thing that really stuck with me. One of his men was sitting on his pack, and he had his kukri out, that famous knife, and he was just sharpening it on a little whetstone, not making a show of it, just this quiet, rhythmic sound. Shink, shink. In the middle of all our noise, the humming engines, the radio chatter, there was this ancient sound. It was personal. Torres sidled up next to me and muttered, "Jesus, sir, they really bring those things?" I just grunted. I thought it was a joke, a cultural relic. They were moving light, too light. No extra packs, none of the clutter my men carried. And when they moved out, they just vanished, not marched. They flowed into the landscape. I watched them for 5 minutes and then they were just gone, into the heat haze. And I had this thought, just a flicker. How did they do that? But I dismissed it. It was just a trick of the light. It had to be. It was months later, after the tour, that I finally understood the smell, or the lack of it. I was at a debrief, and this British major, an old hand, he explained it to me. He said they trained to eliminate their olfactory signature. That's what he called it, their smell. For 2, sometimes 3 days before a long patrol, they changed their diet. No coffee, no spices, no processed sugars. They use unscented soap, or none at all. He told me a trained dog can pick up the scent of a Western soldier from over 1,000 meters if the wind is right. 1,000 meters. They figured the Taliban were no different. Animals. They could smell us coming. The Gurkhas, they just smelled like the dirt, like rocks and rain. And when the major told me this, laid it all out, the science of it, I remember just nodding, trying to look like I knew what he was talking about. But in my head, I was back in that valley, remembering that earthy, alien smell. And I felt like a child. Their whole way of moving was the opposite of ours. We moved like a machine, a big, loud, angry machine. My patrols were 12, sometimes 15 men strong, bristling with gear, comms antennas whipping around. We moved fast, 10, 12 kilometers a day, a show of force. The idea was to intimidate, to let Charlie know we owned the ground. The Gurkhas? They moved like smoke. Small teams, 4 or 5 men. They moved slow, 2 clicks a day, maybe 3. They'd spend hours just watching, listening. We were constantly on the radio, chatter, sit reps, check-ins. It's how we maintained control. Them? Radio silence, absolute, unless the world was ending. They didn't want to find the enemy. That was our job. They wanted the enemy to walk right over them, never knowing they were there until it was too late. They weren't hunting. They were setting a trap, with themselves as the bait. And it worked. God, did it work. That's when it really started to get under my skin, the difference. It wasn't just tactics. It was a completely opposite philosophy of war. My doctrine, the Marine Corps way, it was about imposition. Forcing our will on the battlefield with technology, with speed, with overwhelming firepower. We were the hammer. Theirs was the art of disappearance, patience over speed, invisibility over intimidation, precision over volume. I saw Havildar Gurung a week after the incident, and I tried to talk to him about it. He just looked at me with those calm eyes and said, "Captain, you make the enemy afraid of you. We make him forget we exist." And that was it. A few months later, I saw a battle damage assessment report, casualty exchange ratios. For the Gurkha units in that sector, it was 1 to nearly 500. 1 Gurkha for 500 enemy. I stared at that number for a full minute. It didn't seem real. It was just ink on paper. I hadn't seen it yet. I hadn't walked through the valley. It was 9:22 in the morning, 2 minutes after they'd confirmed my order. I was watching them through my Steiner binoculars, the heat making the air swim, distorting everything. And then I saw it. Movement. Not back towards us, not digging in. Down. They were flowing down the ridge into the valley. All 15 of them. Not like soldiers, like water, like a river finding its path. I couldn't believe it. I grabbed the radio handset, my hands shaking. Not from fear, from pure, white-hot rage. I mashed the transmit button. Gurkha 6, this is Warlord. Return to your position immediately. Acknowledge. Nothing. Just static. That damn hiss. I tried again, my voice cracking. Gurkha 6, I am giving you a direct order. You are endangering your men. Return to the ridge. For the next 8 minutes, I screamed into that radio. And then, nothing. Just silence. For 2 hours. The longest 2 hours of my life. I was dead. I was already planning the casualty reports, writing the letters home in my head, picturing the court-martial, my career, over. My men, their men, slaughtered, because of me. Then, at exactly 11:34, the radio crackled. It was so sudden it made me jump. One voice, calm, not even out of breath. Valley clear. That was it. 2 words. I think I went into shock. I grabbed the mic. Say again your last. What is your status? What are your casualties? Over. The reply was the same, just as calm. Valley clear, Warlord. We are holding at the north end. 0 casualties. I couldn't process it. It was impossible. A trap. A mistake. It took us 4 hours to get my platoon down there. 4 hours of me being certain we were walking into a massacre. We rolled into the valley, weapons hot, expecting a fight. But it was quiet. The only sound was the flies, the buzzing. We walked for 4 kilometers. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. Fortified machine gun nests, mortar pits, all silenced, up close. 47 enemy dead. 47. And Gunny Torres, he walked up beside me, looked at one of the bodies and just said, "Sir, their plan was better." And at the end of it all, there they were, the 15 of them. One was boiling water for tea. Another was cleaning his rifle. Havildar Gurung just sat on a rock watching us approach. No signs of a fight. Their uniforms weren't even that dirty. I walked right up to him. I was going to scream. I was going to relieve him of command. I was going to have him arrested. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. I just looked at him, and his 14 men, all of them alive, without a scratch. And I looked back down the valley at the 47 bodies that my 42 Marines were supposed to fight. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about war, every book I'd read, every class at West Point, it all just turned to dust. My perfect plan would have gotten my men killed. I knew it. Their insane charge, their insubordination, it saved us. The shame, it was like drowning. I just stood there speechless. And he just gave me a little nod. That was it. The lesson was over. I wrote a report. Of course I did. You have to. But what do you write? The truth? That 15 men acting against direct orders did the work of 42 in a third of the time with 0 casualties. That's not a report. That's a career suicide note. And it makes heroes look like mutineers. So I lied. I called it commendable initiative. I wrote that the Gurkha element secured a foothold ahead of schedule, facilitating the main effort. Corporate language. Vague. It buried the miracle and it buried the lesson. I tried to talk to my company commander about it, a major from back east. I remember saying, "Sir, their methods, they're just more efficient. We could learn something." He just looked at me over his coffee cup and said, "Harrison, they got lucky. Don't go native on me. Stick to the doctrine." And that was that. The door was shut, but I couldn't unsee it. In briefings, I'd look at the arrows on the map, and all I saw were paths to cemeteries. It all felt like a lie. That day broke something in me, or maybe it fixed it. I could never again just trust the plan. I spent the rest of that tour, the rest of my career, fighting it, in small ways, pushing for lighter patrols, slower movements, more listening. Sometimes it worked, but mostly the machine just grinds on. It doesn't learn. I think about the men I lost after that day, 17 of them over the next 5 years. And for every single one, I have this gnawing thought. If I had been more like Gurung, if I had trusted my gut instead of the manual, would they be alive? It cost me my career. You can't question the doctrine and expect to get promoted. I topped out as a major and left. I couldn't play the game anymore. For 13 years, I said nothing. Shame, I guess. Loyalty to the core. But it's a debt to those 15 men, to the 47 dead Taliban who never saw them coming, and to my own men, who deserved a leader who understood what real war was, not just the kind you find in a book. So you have to ask why. Why don't institutions learn? It's pride. That simple. You have billions of dollars, entire careers, all wagered on one way of doing things. To admit that 15 men with old rifles are better at it, well, that's not just embarrassing. It's an existential threat. So you bury the report. You call it an anomaly. You stick to the doctrine, and you keep sending good men out with a broken plan. I look at the long years that followed, the conflicts after, the men we lost, and I just see that valley over and over. How do you explain it? You have the evidence, the numbers, all the proof, and you choose to be wrong? It took another decade before some of our special operations guys really started to absorb it, to move like them, to become ghosts. We got there, eventually. But what was the price for that delay? How many lives did it cost to learn a lesson that was taught for free on a Tuesday morning? Remember those questions I asked? The first one, What's it feel like to watch your men disobey you into certain death? It feels like failure, cold and absolute, like watching your own funeral from a great distance. The second question: how do you lead the next day after being proven so wrong? You don't. You shut your mouth and you follow. You listen. For the first time in your life. That 4-kilometer walk through the valley was me finally learning to do just that. And the third: the difference between a soldier and a warrior. A soldier follows the plan, no matter what. A warrior wins the fight. And the price for confusing the two is paid in blood. My plan was perfect. They were just better. 1 to 500. 13 years later, that's the number. That's the one that still wakes me up at night.